Hey everyone, John Stenstrom here from the Cast and Spear podcast, and today we have Memo Arikok. He's an accomplished freediver out of Turkey. He's been diving since the age of 6, so we actually go into a little bit about what it's like to be a parent, to get your kid diving at an early age. He's also an accomplished freediver, breaking numerous national records. He's also one of the only Turkish freedivers to ever hit the legendary blue hole. He actually went to the bottom, so it's super impressive. He's also a training director for SSI, so we cover a bunch of different things to improve our diving. So please welcome Memo.
I've been freediving for the big part of my life. So the adventure started when I was 4 because of my father. He was an avid spearfisherman, and this is how I started the sport. I started spearfishing when I was a kid, and then spearfishing turned into a passion in the later parts of my life. When I was in the college, the fire of spearfishing, caught me big time. I decided to live with my passion. I was from the central part of Turkey. Then I said, okay, this is not so easy. I have to do something. Then I moved to Gibraltar for the purpose of spearfishing, but actually it was also work. And I lived in Gibraltar for almost 3.5 years. When I came back to Turkey, then of course my life has already been changed, and I moved to the seaside, and I moved to Bodrum, which is on the western coast of Turkey. And since then, it has been almost 15 years. I am living by the sea, on the sea, in the sea. And yes, since 2011, I've been teaching freediving in all levels. And yeah, this is my life now. I teach people how to hold their breath, and I create instructors, and I'm a big freediving family. That's how I, see my mission in my life.
That's awesome. All right, does
In
that
a
mean
nutshell, yeah, this is me.
when you said you're living on the water, are you living on a boat right now?
No. It's like, but I spent, like big time of the day on the boat, going to the dive spots, coming back. So it is, yeah, I live very close to the sea though.
I want to unpack what you're talking about with your father, and I want to know what it's like to just have somebody who already was into spearfishing, kind of get you into it at an early age. Because I know there's a lot of people who like spearfishing and might be having kids now. Do you recommend getting them into the water at 4 years old, or?
Well, swimming for sure, yeah. Breath holding and diving under supervision, under direct supervision. It's not like, son, be careful, go and free dive on your own. That doesn't work for a kid. But yes, an influencer in the family, a first degree influencer, can do a lot for someone who wants to start spearfishing or freediving in general. From the previous experiences of your mentor, you get into a fast track to learn about freediving. The problem is when you are at the very early ages, it's always a game. And you know how kids are. Sometimes you enjoy the game too much, and you can also get bored from the game so fast. So I don't think it is really very much possible to start spearfishing at the age of 4 and continue spearfishing at the age of 44. So there will probably be some hiccups or breaks on and offs in the career, but for sure, getting familiar with the water at the very early ages is a great thing. That's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. Do you have any recommendations, say, for somebody who might not have been having access to, spearfishing or the water at an early age, but maybe they're a little bit older? Did you have any kind of recommendations for that? Should they immediately go to kind of like a freediving course and then kind of get familiar, or should they just hit the pool first and kind of just, I'm just curious on, because I know there's probably some people who will hear this and be like, look, I can't even swim. And do you have any kind of recommendations for them?
I had a lot of students like that. They just wanted to spearfish, but that they didn't know how to swim. So, they wanted to do fishing, but not even swimming yet. Yes, a proper start would be a good freediving class for sure. It will give the foundations of breath holding. It will give the foundations of freediving skills. to move efficiently in the water and to use your breath also efficiently. And spearfishing, on top of these skills, is all about understanding the nature, right? You observe the nature, you observe the behavior of the fish, and you try to be like the fish. In order to do that, you should be feeling comfortable under the water on your breath hold. So definitely a good point would be taking a class. Learning from internet or learning from friends does not give you the best result all the time. Maybe they know wrong, you know. So there's no guarantee it will give you the good results or the best results or the safest results learning from, let's say, uncertified friends, but a dedicated freediving class will give you that. All of the proper freediving programs start from pool. So it will also make them comfortable with the skills starting from shallow to deeper. And this way, they will have the perfect start for spearfishing as well.
Yes. So I haven't taken a class and it's been 2 years. And last week was probably my first real close call of like being in a bad situation. So I'm excited because I'm taking my first class this week.
Good.
This was the moment, but I can speak on that where it's like I've kind of grew up in the water myself, thought I was, I was pretty decent at snorkeling. I can hold my breath. I can get down to like 40 feet, and that's pretty good for most spearfishing here in Southern California. But it's those fringe use cases that can get us hurt. And it's the like not being comfortable in that one moment where you start to panic, where your kind of course or any course in general with active good foundation would have probably prevented that, like how to ditch gear. That's something that I don't see enough people talk about, is how to ditch gear effectively, because I got trapped in the kelp and I had a big fish in my hand, trapped in the kelp, and thought I could make it to the surface instead of like be calm. And that was the problem, was I thought I was pretty decent at staying calm. Do you have any recommendations about staying calm during a crisis? That's what I would like to know.
Well, first of all, like you said, it's a battle for the brain, yeah, for the mind. When you are in trouble, whatever the situation is, your brain is very inclined to freak out. But the logical side of your brain says, be calm, take it easy, take it easy. So we have to always remember that. In the situation of a crisis, number one rule is, if we can make the situation easier for ourselves, we start making these things easy for ourselves, like ditching the weight belt, for example. If you are in doubt about the situation, if you think this can be a problem, rule number one, ditch the weight belt. Never ever hesitate. Once the weight belt is out, you will be floating, you will be positively buoyant, and it will become much more easy to come back to the surface. In spearfishing, let's say you're fighting with a big fish, and it's the fish of your life, but you are under-rigged. You don't have fighting buoys, or you don't have a big enough reel on your gun. So what do? If the fish starts pulling you down to the deep water during your ascent, then the logical thing is not to fight with the fish and try to, like bring it back with you to the surface. If you think you cannot win this battle, maybe the logical thing is to cut the line, or even ditch the spear gun. So always, rule number one is assess the situation, make it easy for yourself, and like you said, staying calm becomes much easier after that point. This would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I also find that, and I'm curious on what you're thinking, is it also comes down to muscle memory too in these kind of fight or flight moments.
Yeah.
Like if you don't practice, like logically I knew ditch the weight belt, but then I had other things in my head where it's like it was a weird situation because I was kind of wrapped up in kelp, and the kelp was the thing that was kind of wrapping up my legs a little bit. But I was just like, there's too many things that I needed to do, whereas I haven't even practiced more than a couple of times ditching the weight belt, so it didn't feel as natural to me. So I'm thinking it's like the muscle memory thing of like constantly working in the safety aspects more consistently. Because I don't know about you, because it's like I go diving once or twice a week maybe, but it's like how many times do I go diving for the sheer purpose of safety training.
Yeah.
Maybe once, twice a year if I'm lucky. It's like you got to get the friends that want to go like practice that kind of thing, because you don't want to just do it by yourself. So I think the safety aspect to build the muscle memory is important too.
Is definitely important. I mean, statistically, they say developing a habit takes a minimum of 18 days of repetition. So if you think like that, practicing safety skills once or twice a year, okay, will give you the understanding and will keep you, like sharp in the safety knowledge, but they will not become your second nature. So as ditching the weight belt. But if you are feeling comfortable in the water, panic does not come all of a sudden. It builds up. So this sensation of, oh, I'm in trouble, starts to build up slowly. And when you realize it's getting worse, then you will have the understanding. Sure, muscle memory is important, but if you manage to remember, then you can always ditch the weight belt.
Absolutely.
To tell you the truth, there are, like at the end of each dive, for example, the dive should end up with recover breathing. This is a bigger problem, if you ask me, in the spearfishing community. People don't do recover breaths. And majority of the freediving accidents happen on the surface due to the lack of recover breathing or the improper recover breathing. So this must become your second nature. At the end of every dive, you should be doing recover breathing, and this is no matter what the depth or the duration of the dive is.
Do you have recommendation, or what's the standard protocol? Because I've heard it before, where it's like a couple deep breaths and a couple quick breaths. But what is the right way to do it?
It's very easy. Let me explain the logic behind the recover breathing. Our natural tendency after a performance, when we perform, we just inhale and exhale fast to recover. But this is a habit which we had developed on land. If you sprint, you breathe harder. That's it. But if you are holding your breath and if you are performing, your body accumulates way more carbon dioxide than you can accumulate on land, and you can also reduce the oxygen supplies way more than a sprint which you do on land. So heavy breathing, fast breathing is not the best at the end of a free dive. What we have to do is, as soon as we come back to the surface, we do a passive exhale. We just open the airways and let the air go out on its own without spending any energy. Then you make a fast, full inhale. Hold it at least 2 seconds, maybe 3 preferably, and you repeat that 3 times. So passive exhale, fast full inhale, hold it for 2 seconds, and then repeat it again. So this is recover breathing. At the end of every dive, you should do it 3 times. This is a game changer. I've seen in freediving competitions so many times people properly recovering from an almost blackout or from an almost loss of motor control, let's say. So this works.
I'll definitely have to start implementing it. I have been doing it a little bit, but I haven't been as religious as I should. Is timing on the surface a criteria as well? Or do you just focus primarily on the recovery breathing? Or do you have like a set protocol where it says like, if you're down for a minute 30, stay up for at least 4 minutes?
Yes. So surface time and resting intervals are also very important. The more you dive, physically, the more fit you become. So resting on the surface starts to feel like a burden, starts to feel like, oh my God, again, do I have to wait this long? So at a point when freediver gets fit, these feelings starts to build up, they come. However, if you would like to make a proper safe diving routine, if you want to create it, it is 3 times the dive time.
3 times.
Minimum. Okay. Yeah, like that. This can include breathe up as well. It's not like I have to just chit chat 3 times the dive time. You can also start your breathe up during this time, but for a super safe surface interval, it is 3 times.
Oh, that makes sense. I want to switch gears a little bit to when you talked about being comfortable in the water. Mm-hmm. Do you find that freediving and spearfishing in itself is a form of meditation for yourself? Can you go into that a little bit?
Of course. I really don't remember myself freediving or spearfishing and at the same time thinking about what I have to do after the session, after the dive. You know, like when I am freediving, when I am spearfishing, it's always about that moment only. In freediving, maybe it's a little bit more tricky, but in spearfishing, you are always living at that moment. Your focus is on the dive, but you are so aware of what's going on around you. You know, you have to watch the bait fish, you have to watch the prey, you have to check if the current is coming from this direction or that direction. In a way, you have to stay in that moment, but you know, like without losing the focus on anything around you. So spearfishing is like a super pure form of meditation. I totally agree on that. In freediving, in proper freediving, when you are freediving on the line, on a deep dive, let's say, your primary concern is not to catch a fish. It is, let's say, to achieve depth. When you are achieving depth, your primary concern can be several things. Like sometimes we have fears. You know, if it's a really challenging depth, you may start thinking, am I good enough? You know, you may start to question your breath holding ability. So most of the time, equalization can be the issue. You may be super focused on your equalization, but you may not be so much aware of your technique when you are going down in the water. Or, you know, it can be the environmental factors like current or surface movement or something else, which may distract you. So in freediving, it's more physical. It's more, let's say, yeah, it's more physical. While you are focusing on your target, you have to be aware of what's going on around you. But yes, both of them are super meditative, in my opinion, the best. Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I want to switch gears a little bit because, like you said right there, am I good enough, when it comes to freediving to hit certain depths? And I know when you go to, say, blue water spearfishing, just the abyss that you see in front of you with no structure can be scary at times. How would you say freediving and spearfishing has affected your ability to cope with fear?
Oh, well, it take a lot of time. It's like coping with fear. I still get scared from a deep dive. The thing is, you have to accept if you are afraid of the dive, you should say it frankly to yourself that is challenging for you. If you do it, then only you sign a truce between your fear and your abilities. Then you start challenging yourself in small steps in a progressive approach. But I don't think, at least for me, the fear is always there. In a deep dive or in a deep spearfishing experience, there's always something deep inside you. Like you ask this question, am I good enough? Am I going to make it? But if you don't feel like you are going to make it, you don't need to go all the way down, And if you are afraid of the dive, you should just accept that is too scary. And if it overwhelms you, you just stop. You abort the dive. You go back. It's not this, how do you say, this macho challenge. You don't need to corner your fear and try to break it. It is, I think, when you are in the ocean, when you are against the abyss, like you said, you just cannot challenge it. It's always deeper or bigger than you.
Do you find there is a difference, however, between what the method you just said or the with freediving? It's a lot of in your control, right? Or I mean, you can get hit by a shark or something, but it's probably less so than when you're out in the middle of the place where you're trying to hunt. So I see that one as like you versus yourself kind of activity, right? Can you, and over time you'll get there, hopefully. But then in spearfishing, you have an aspect of that plus this unknown, which is the wilderness environment, because you're actively participating in this, apex kind of predatory type thing. Is there anything, do you see a difference in there, or is it all the same? It's like you're still you versus yourself. It's just a different situation.
I think at the end, they stimulate the same part of the brain. Like one is deeper, one is not so deeper. Like if you are aiming for 80-meter dive, I think it's around 250 feet. Spearfishing at that depth is not possible, or at least on constant weight. So in spearfishing, yes, you have the same challenge. You have the wilderness, you have the wild nature, you have everything around you going on. But it's sort of in a less deep. It's taking place in the more shallow environment. So the challenge is the challenge. I think, yeah, it just stimulates the same part of the brain. It's just a different medium. One is the depth, one is the combination of other things. But I think the fear is the same, or the part of the brain freaking out is the same part. That's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. Have you have you used any tools or books or anything like that to kind of understand the fear, and or just over time the amount of dives you've done have and being in the water so often, you're just like, okay, like I don't have anything to fear anymore just because I've done it so much. It's my home now, kind of thing. Or do you have any books?
Yeah, no, I read some books, but not because I think my problem was the fear. So I was reading some stuff to develop a, let's say, better meditation technique to focus better during my dives. So visualization, for example, this is what I'm doing. In order to do it much nicer, I was reading quite a lot of stuff. However, the wake-up call happened after a dive. I was in a competition trying to do a dive. The dive was good. However, the sensations just before the dive was not so pleasant, And after the dive, I always give myself 5 minutes or so, and I try to assess the dive on my own in a silent corner. So when I was thinking, how was the dive? What was these feelings? How did it go? Then I realized, like the deep dive just scares me. When I understood it's simply I'm afraid of the dive, it became much easier to accept the situation.
That's deep. I want to switch gears a little bit to understanding risk, because this activity of freediving and spearfishing is something that inherently is one of the most risky things in the world. So how do you assess that? I mean, I'm not saying it's risky in a bad way. I'm just saying it's something that's not kind of par for the course. I mean, somebody can get in a car and drive and still be like likely to get in an accident or something. But I'm curious on, out of all the activities in the world, you have understood that there is some risk in this sport. What keeps you going? Like, what keeps you to say, like, my logic brain says, that's dangerous, and if I'm trying to live a long time, I wouldn't do it. But in reality, it's like, it drives me so hard because I find so much something. What would you say to that?
I mean, the analogy of the car goes for freediving or spearfishing as well. Like, regular driving a car is not so risky, right? If you follow the rules, if you put your seatbelt on, if you do not overspeed, and if it's a nice day, the risks are very low. In spearfishing, freediving, the same. If you are in a good day, conditions are nice. If you are not pushing yourself too much, and if you are not trying something crazy, the risks are pretty low. However, if you try to speed up, just like a car, if you start pushing yourself hard, yes, you increase the risks for sure. So you can manage the risks. First of all, the good foundation of freediving, just like we spoke before, lets you understand your body more. You should understand what is your signal to go up, what is your urge to breathe, for example. The urge to breathe should be your wake-up call and should be the alarm for your ascent, for example. And the progress should always be in small steps. If you are doing a 20-meter dive comfortably, this should not be meaning tomorrow you can do a 30-meter dive. The increase in the depth should always be 2-meter, 2-meter, or like in really small steps. The increase in your dive times should also be like that fashion. But if you get too excited with your progress in the water and start to push yourself heavily, yes, for sure, risks increase. And your insurance policy in the water is always your body. And if you are diving alone, if you're practicing spearfishing alone, for sure, you just multiply the risks much, much higher. But I don't think it is too risky if you have a progressive approach. If you are trying to understand your body, and instead of pushing it hard from the beginning, if your philosophy is towards repetition and to gain experience and to feel comfortable in the water, I don't think it's very risky. You can do freediving or spearfishing all your life long without even having a single blackout. And still, diving amazingly or catching the best fish that you can ever imagine.
I've heard that before in other kind of extreme, quote unquote, extreme sports where somebody would say it's not risky. You just got to follow the rules. You got to be
Yeah,
cognizant of what the situation is. The risk comes from being dumb, essentially, not using common sense, diving in the worst conditions, diving alone, drinking before diving, whatever it is, it's like all these things will stack up, and then it only takes that one over the straw on the camel's back kind of thing to go
exactly.
over. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. I
Um,
mean, we have a tendency to challenge ourselves. Like we have a tendency to break our planning, which is in our mind. If you feel good, you immediately start thinking like, oh, I can do 2 times better than that. But in free diving or spearfishing, there is no such thing like 2 times all of a sudden. So it is one step ahead at a time. But if you follow these practices, I think it's one of the safest sports on earth.
I also like what you were saying regarding it's going back to that meditation piece of using your body as an alarm clock. You have to be like aware of your body. And I don't think a
Yeah.
lot of people, especially in our day-to-day lives, we're always go, go, go. And I think that's why meditation has taken off so much in the last, 5-10 years in the
Yeah.
States. But, to actively be kind of feeling those body signals. If you're getting them during a dive, you're probably also getting them on land. You're just not recognizing them.
Of
So
course.
it's good to kind of have that time to be with yourself to figure things out.
Of course.
Shifting gears a little bit. I know we've talked a lot about free diving. I want to kind of go a little bit into your spearfishing background and kind of understand, do you still do it after all these years? And if so, what does spearfishing mean to you in terms of, the ability to get your own food, the community, those kind of aspects?
Yeah. Like I said, I started spearfishing when I was a kid, but at the beginning it was just to catch a fish and eat with the friends. There was no deeper meaning behind it. At some point, I started to discover the techniques of spearfishing, waiting for the fish, doing a nice ambush. And then it started to fascinate me because, especially when I was waiting for the fish, I started to think like, I am almost communicating with the fish. Because when you hide yourself, when you create the curiosity, the fish just comes and tries to see what you are. So that was my moment of interacting with the ocean. And yes, was I catching a fish at the time? Yeah, always. But it was only about catching the fish that I was looking for. It's not like catching a fish which was around. So it started like that, and it became a big passion. So it was the community that big when I was spearfishing regularly? Not so much, but we had a healthy group. We had a team of friends who were spearfishing regularly, and in years they kept spearfishing and they get all better. When my professional career in freediving started, of course, I started to spend way more time in the water compared to the times that I was spearfishing. You can say it collateral damage or you can say it occupational hazard, but maybe occupational hazard is the better word. Like these days when I have free time, I prefer to read a book because I spend 6 days diving every week. So, do I still spearfish? Yes, but I only spearfish when I have my good buddies around because it is still such a beautiful activity for me. And I just want to share it with the people that I really like, that I really want to have this moment with. So, every spearfishing day is a special occasion for me. It's like a celebration. I just do it with the right people. It's not like I am urging for spearfishing every day. I still like freediving a lot, and like it changed a little bit. Once upon a time, spearfishing was the thing for me. Now freediving is the thing for me. So it just shifted a little bit, but still I like it. I like it a lot. I like to catch the fish and have it with my friends and take to the Mother Ocean and say thank you for giving us this gift, and we enjoy every last bit of it.
Do you have a super memorable fish that you caught with your friends that kind of still resonates with you, or has any of your kind of group outings, to go out to get fish with your friends, has it done super meaningful? Like you just remember one all the time. You're just like, wow, that was an amazing day, and I still think about it.
Well, we always laugh a lot. So any day that I laugh a lot, it becomes a super memorable day. But rarely it's about the fish, yeah. So I don't see the day as like, oh, there was this fish, this grouper, amazingly big, and we managed to get it. But there was like when you ask this, all of a sudden, it just this memory strikes. We were in Gibraltar diving with my buddy Shane, and we were diving on a reef, La Seca, across a little bit outside Gibraltar. So it's basically a ledge in the middle of the sea. The top is 12 meters or 36, 38 feet. And the bottom of the ledge is around 20 meters, so 60 feet. The current that day, at that time, it depends on the tide. So it was hitting the ledge. It was hitting the front face of the wall. And the trick is you have to make your descent just behind this wall because the current is super powerful. It hits the vertical side of the wall and then it goes over the first couple of meters of the ledge. So if you manage to land in the first 5 meters of the ledge, you sort of have a calm zone. You can move your gun easily, you can, like relax much better, and it's not a deep dive at all. So it becomes very much fun. However, if you happen to land a little bit behind, then you have strong currents. And what I mean by strong current, it becomes almost impossible to hold the gun straight, that much of a current. So that day we knew there was this prized fish, Dentix, in the area we saw in a couple of dives, and we were looking for the school of fish. And I managed to land not at the perfect spot. It was a little bit behind the perfect spot. So I shot one, a big one, and the fish just darted away. It was taking line from the reel, and I just couldn't see it. It was not the best visibility around. So when I was doing my ascent, I felt like the fish got stuck, or like it got tangled. But the current was pushing me away at the same time. By the time I was at the surface, there was no line at my reel because I was still drifting away on the surface. And at some point, I just couldn't hold the gun anymore. It just slipped from my fingers. So my best gun, my sweetheart, just disappeared in the blue, and so as the fish. So not only I lost the fish, but the gun. And of course, Shane came and he said, what happens? I told the situation, and we just took some transits around and we started to search for the gun and the fish. So it took a good hour or so. We were diving, sort of with a system to scan the area to see if we can find the gun. And yeah, at the end we found the gun and the fish. That's weird, like that's kind of a memory I just couldn't forget.
Well, that's exactly what I was kind of hoping for, because every time I think back, it isn't really about the fish. It's about that kind of journey
Yeah, exactly.
with your friends and your colleagues and things like that. So
Exactly.
I'm glad that just even having that question popped that in your mind, because I was right there with you. I was imagining that whole thing. That's amazing. I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to also be cognizant of your time. I just want to ask, is there anything that you've gifted? What's the one thing that you've gifted the most to people? It doesn't have to be in freediving or spearfishing, but I'm just curious on what is that one thing that you've gifted the most?
What do you mean by gifted?
Like it could be a book, could be something that really resonates with you. Like if you had to give somebody, it's like, hey, it's nice to have met you. Like you should try this book. It really helped me a lot. Or
Ah,
this piece of gear really helped me a lot. Or it's like, oh, I wish
yeah.
everybody had a stringer. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah. I know what you mean. Well, if you're talking about the equipment, that never was my favorite gift, yeah, to offer, to give, because not one piece of the equipment can make a super big difference. However, the books, I gifted. Have you ever heard Carlos Ailes? He is an
I love
American
that book.
writer. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
The
love his books.
underwater free hunters, or The Last of the Blue Water Hunters is the book I read.
Yeah, The Last of the Blue Water Hunters, and I think one was Dolphin Born or something. So that was my favorite gift to give to the people who were really into spearfishing. Like that guy, he really describes the feelings when you are fishing, when you are spearfishing. Yes, there is the challenge of getting a big fish, but like this almost imaginary world, this surreal feelings. Those books really give these feelings to the reader. So that was the thing I gave most.
We're on the same page. I gifted that exact book to my buddy who I wanted
Yeah,
to get into spearfishing just because
yeah,
he's a master storyteller. Like
exactly.
he makes me feel like I've already lived on a boat in Catalina trying to get a white sea bass.
And you
Now I
know
want to
his
go do
story,
it.
right?
That's
Yeah,
funny.
he was a super keen spearfisherman, and I think he was in Turks and Caicos or somewhere in the Caribbean. So he got infected with ciguatera, and like he got sick, he got paralyzed in the island that he was camping for 2 days, and then he got conscious back, and that was the end of his spearfishing career. When you got this ciguateric toxin, whenever you eat seafood, you show the symptoms of this disease again. So he said, if I cannot eat the fish, why am I killing the fish? So his spearfishing chapter, like closed down with that episode. And then he got really motivated by taking underwater photos and writing. So he is the guy. He really, really, like describes everything super nicely.
That's awesome. If you could put anything on a billboard for everybody in the world to read, what would you say?
Ooh, I would say try freediving. It will change your world for sure. It is for someone who is not familiar with the sea, who is not familiar with the underwater. I think freediving is an amazing start. At the beginning, it's not so much about seeing what's going on, but it's probably the best way to know yourself better. So to face your fears, to know how capable you can become, and it will for sure change your world. It's a beautiful lifestyle. Once you're in it, you just want to continue and dive more, 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 uh, and uh, and it goes on like that. I would put that. Yeah, try freediving.
I love it. Is there a piece of common knowledge or something in the industry that everybody believes that you think is totally wrong or absurd? It doesn't have to be freediving, could be spearfishing or something else in life.
Well, there used to be several things. Yeah, I don't know if they're around as well. Like when you said, I don't have something flashing in my brain like a recent recent stuff. There used to be people 20 years ago, people still used to support hyperventilation in freediving. Yeah, that is absolutely big lie. So hyperventilation is a very dangerous stuff, and overbreathing can make your freediving extremely dangerous because you don't know which stage of your breath hold you are at. So maybe you're not feeling your urge to breathe, but you may be, burning your reserve oxygen, which you should be using for your ascent. So it manipulates the body or the brain, let's say. So that was one. And the other thing was, people used to say, when you feel stressed, when you feel in danger, just grab your weight belt, open the buckle, but keep the weight belt tight in your hand. Like if something happens, you will be automatically dropping the weight belt and you will make it back to the surface. I think that is a big bullshit. So excuse my language. If you are conscious enough to open your weight belt, you should just ditch it. That was one of the things which drove me crazy, like the first day I heard about it. So you don't hesitate, if you think you're in trouble, you just ditch the white belt, not open it and wait for the accident to happen.
No, I like that. I've heard that. To me was still something that I've heard about holding it in your hand. So now I know, just drop it. Just
Exactly.
let it go.
Just check it.
That's really kind of all the questions I have. I guess if you could say one other thing, or if anything else comes to mind in terms of getting people into spearfishing, what would it be that we didn't cover? Or freediving?
Well, I think spearfishing is super nice, and it's beautiful, and it's the most selective fishing technique in the world. I always wanted to believe if everyone knew how to spearfish, the fish population would be much better than today. Commercial fishing and the traditional fishing techniques like lines, the nets, they cannot select the prey. So, but spearfishing is different. If you're good enough, you manage to catch the fish that you are looking for. And there's always an adventure in the sea whenever you get wet. So you never know what you're going to see. You never know what kind of mood the fish is in. You never become sure what kind of conditions will meet you under the water. So it is a never-ending experience, never-ending adventure. My suggestion would be just to enjoy every moment of it. It's not about the score. It's not about the fish. It is the spearfishing journey from beginning to end. Every stage of the fishing teaches you something. Even putting your suit and getting ready for the dive, becoming a little bit careful with how you prepare your stuff, how you rig your spear gun. These are the parts of your adventure, and they make you more experienced. Catching just the fish is a small detail. Like if a spearfishing day gives you 100 points of experience, let's say, catching the fish will probably give you just 10. The rest of the day is the real experience. And I would suggest also for freediving, this is exactly the same. I would suggest to focus on the big picture, not just the score, the fish, or the dive, the depth in freediving. So it gives a lot of experience. And at the end, it makes us wiser. That's what I'm thinking.
Memo, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that does it for this episode of the podcast. Huge thank you to Memo. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts so more people can find it, and leave a comment because I want to hear from you. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.